Hi, ABA therapists and parents. If you're new to ABA or applied behavior analysis, there are some terms that you really need to know and understand because we may use these terms in therapy, and you would think that they mean something, but they really mean something else. So in ABA, when we say the word environment, we don't usually mean like the overall environment of the home, but we mainly are focusing on what happens before and after a specific behavior. We're trying to either increase or decrease. So the environment consists of antecedent and consequence. So when we look at a target behavior, for example, a problematic behavior that we're trying to decrease, we look at what happened right before the behavior and what happened right after the behavior. Also, if we are trying to increase a specific behavior and it does occur every once in a while, we try to take data on what happened before and what happened after this specific behavior to try to make changes to the environment to increase the behavior. So whatever happens before the behavior is called antecedent, and what happens right after is called a consequence. Now, a lot of people think a consequence means punishment or something that we do to the child to make him understand or her understand, that every action or behavior has a consequence. But that's not really what it means in ABA. Consequence basically means whatever happens right after the behavior. It could be something out of our hands. So for example, if your child, every time the child cries, his sibling comes and push him, now the consequence of his crying was a sibling pushing him. We don't really have control over the sibling at this point. We're just taking data, and we realize the consequence of his crying is a sibling getting upset and pushing. So that's what a consequence may be, but it doesn't mean punishment or anything that we do to the child. Consequences are very important because they tell us, why the behavior is happening and continue to happen. Antecedent are also very important because they may trigger some behaviors. It depends on, the time of day and, the setting. So, for example, a child who may not want to do some activity may, once you ask him to do it, may start engaging in hitting or crying to try to escape this behavior. So here, the antecedent of this behavior was you telling him to do something. So that triggered the behavior of hitting or crying. So environment, again, is really what happens right before and right after the behavior that we're trying to focus on. Antecedent is what's happening before, and consequence is what happens after. Reinforcement is a consequence that results in maintaining or increasing the behavior in the future. So reinforcement is usually something that comes right after the behavior. So it's a type of consequence because consequence, again, is what happens after. But reinforcement always means that it's something that happens which causes the behavior to continue in the future. So, this child is crying in the supermarket for candy. You give him candy. Next time he's there, most likely he will cry again to get the candy. So if you're giving him candy is reinforcing that, then his behavior of crying will continue to happen. Okay, we don't call something reinforcement from the first time because we want to see how it impacts the behavior in the future. So we have to wait and see if the behavior happens again. If it does happen over and over again, then we can, conclude that yes, this thing we did right after the behavior is considered reinforcement. There are two types of reinforcement. There's positive and negative. Now, positive and negative both have the same impact on the behavior, which is increasing the behavior. Negative reinforcement does not mean punishment, and it does not mean that the behavior will stop. No, they're both reinforcements, and both positive and negative reinforcements increase the behavior. But what is the difference? So positive is when we add something to the environment as a result of the behavior. So if your child is crying and you give him a water bottle to drink or juice to calm down, then you're adding something that was not there, which is the water or the juice. Negative reinforcement is removing something, and as a result, the behavior is maintained. So what could you be possibly removing from the environment that makes the behavior continue to happen? I'll tell you an example. If you're giving the child, again, homework to do, and then he cries and screams, so then you remove the homework from the environment, or you say, okay, you don't have to do your homework now. Now you're removing something from the environment the child does not like, which is a homework. That's negative reinforcement because you're removing something the child does not like. Also, for example, if say there's a fire alarm going off and the child, is really overwhelmed with the noise, and they decide to put their headphones on. Now they got rid of the fire alarm noise. That's a negative reinforcement, and it's reinforcing the behavior of putting the headphones on their head. So and it will increase this behavior in the future every time there's a fire alarm. So again, whatever kind of reinforcement it is, it means that it does increase the behavior in the future. Now let's talk about punishment, which we rarely use in ABA, but punishment is really a consequence, something that happens right after the behavior that decreases the behavior in the future. So it could be positive or negative. Positive could be you're adding something to the environment right after this child behavior that decreases the behavior in the future. Negative is taking away something from the child or from the environment right after the behavior, and that will decrease the behavior in the future. So positive punishment could be, telling the child that they are not good. Okay. So now you're adding something that was not there. You're telling them you're not good and I don't like what you're doing. Now, if that consequence of you saying that to the child will decrease this behavior they did in the future, then we can consider it punishment. If it doesn't decrease it, that it wasn't punishment. It may be even become an reinforcement if you see this behavior happening over and over again, that your attention to him, even though it's negative attention, you're not saying something pleasant to him, could increase the behavior in the future, because that could be a form of attention. You're giving him an attention, even though you're not really being, very positive. Negative punishment is taking something away, and we do that a lot when we say, for example, give me your phone because you screamed at your brother. So now you're taking the phone away. Again, we cannot consider it punishment until we see what happens next in the future. If he stops screaming at his brother, then yes, taking away the phone from your child is considered punishment. So these are some terms that, are very important to understand. We use them a lot, especially enforcement and antecedent and consequence. And it's very important to understand that they don't mean, punishment, or like the word consequence does not mean punishment. Positive and negative does not mean, good and bad, but they are just different terms to describe what we do right after the behavior. Thank you for listening.